When you hear Revelation 6, you probably think of one thing, right? The four horsemen of the apocalypse: conquest, war, famine, death. I mean, it's the foundation for so much of our modern apocalyptic imagery. But what if that iconic, absolutely terrifying ride is just the opening act? In this explainer, we're going to push past all the fire and brimstone to uncover a much deeper, much more radical argument that's hidden in this chapter, one that actually redefines the very meaning of suffering, justice, and faith. Right, the big four. You've got the white horse of conquest, the red one for war, the black horse of famine, and that pale horse of death. And these guys, they're not some obscure biblical figures, are they? No way. They are total cultural icons. They've galloped straight out of the pages of scripture and onto our movie screens, into our music, into our art. For a lot of people, they are the apocalypse.
But here's the twist. As central as they seem, the horsemen, they aren't the main event of Revelation 6. They're the setup. John of Patmos is using this familiar, terrifying imagery to set the stage for a much more profound and urgent question. It turns out, the real key to understanding this chapter isn't the writers at all, but the voices we hear after the thunder of their hooves has finally faded. So first up, the four horsemen ride. Before we can really dig into the heart of the chapter, we have to understand this opening act. And right off the bat, John does something really subtle, but it's theologically huge. In his vision, the horsemen are not unleashed by God himself. Instead, these four celestial living beings are the ones who call them forth. This creates a kind of literary buffer, you know? It intentionally distances God from being the direct, hands-on source of all the chaos that's about to unfold. And what's really fascinating here is the progression. You gotta see this. It's not just random, senseless chaos. John is laying out a clear, terrifying domino effect. Just look at the sequence. It kicks off with conquest, which of course inevitably leads to civil war. That internal strife then triggers economic collapse and famine. And the final result of all this societal breakdown? You guessed it, widespread plague and death. John is painting a picture of a world that's not just ending, but is systematically unraveling.
So you've got all this epic, cosmic imagery happening, and then bam, John grounds us with this shockingly specific economic detail. As the black horse of famine rides out, a voice declares the price of food: a full day's wages for just 2 pounds of wheat. But then you get this really strange command: don't damage the oil and the wine. Now, this isn't just a random detail thrown in there. John is making a really pointed critique. So, what's he getting at? And that is the whole point. This isn't just about a famine. What John is doing here is some seriously sharp social commentary. A denarius, that's a soldier's entire day's pay, could barely buy enough wheat to keep you alive. But meanwhile, the luxury goods, the oil and wine that are staples for the wealthy, they are explicitly protected. John is painting this picture of a world where the apocalypse itself has a class divide, where the rich are insulated from the very same suffering that is crushing the poor. And this theme of unjust suffering, well, that brings us directly to the fifth seal, which is the true heart of the chapter. The horsemen have ridden past, the stage is now set with chaos and inequality, and now we finally arrive at the main event. All that chaos was just the prelude. This is the climax of the chapter's whole argument. Okay, so after all the chaos of the horsemen, the perspective just shifts dramatically. John sees the souls of martyrs under this heavenly altar, and they cry out with this raw, painful question that honestly becomes the theological engine for the entire book. How long before you avenge our blood? This is so much more than a plea for vengeance. It's a direct challenge to the heavens. Why do the faithful suffer while evil seems to triumph? This question, this is a perfect, gut-wrenching example of what theologians call theodicy, that struggle to reconcile a good, all-powerful God with a world that is just full of evil and unjust suffering. This shows us that John isn't just spinning some scary story about the future. No, he is directly confronting the single most painful question his persecuted audience was living with every single day. Now, to really get John's revolutionary answer to this cry, we first have to understand the old answer. You see, John's audience already had a powerful framework for making sense of righteous suffering, one that they drew from a well-known and deeply respected set of Jewish writings, the books of Maccabees. You have to remember who John's writing for. This is a community that is absolutely steeped in Jewish tradition and scripture. For them, the stories of the Maccabean martyrs, who died resisting the pagan king Antiochus IV about 2 centuries earlier, were foundational.
And these weren't just history lessons. They were powerful theological touchstones that provided the very language for understanding faithfulness, persecution, and divine justice.
And in 2nd Maccabees, you see this theology spelled out by the martyrs themselves. As they're being brutally tortured, they declare that their suffering isn't random or meaningless. No, in their eyes, it's a just, corrective punishment from God, not for their own individual sins, but for the collective sins of their nation.
This is the key concept, known as vicarious atonement. The belief was that by enduring these horrific deaths with unwavering faith, a righteous few could pay a spiritual debt on behalf of the many. Their suffering would appease God's anger and reconcile the nation to him. In short, their martyrdom had a clear transactional purpose.
And this is where we get to the absolute core of John's argument in Revelation 6. He takes this familiar, powerful Maccabean model of suffering as atonement, and he completely dismantles it.
Okay, so this slide just lays it all out, side by side. It's brilliant. On the left, you've got the established Maccabean model. Suffering is atonement. The righteous die to pay for national sins, hoping to appease God's anger. But look to the right. In John's Revelation model, suffering is not atonement. And why? Because the atoning price has already been paid in full by the slain lamb. This radically changes the goal. It's no longer about appeasing God through your own sacrifice. It's about patient endurance and faithful testimony to the sacrifice that has already been made.
Look, I really can't overstate what a bombshell this would have been for his audience. John was taking their primary tool for making sense of persecution, their entire theological lens for suffering, and completely recalibrating it. He's telling them, yes, your suffering has meaning, but not in the way you've always believed. So that just raises a massive question, right? If the suffering of the faithful no longer atones for sin, what on earth is its purpose? And if they aren't paying the price, well, who did?
And this slide just boils it down perfectly. It shows this fundamental transfer of responsibility that John is proposing. In the old model, the burden of atonement rests on the shoulders of the many. The righteous community has to suffer collectively. But in John's new model, that entire burden has been shifted onto the shoulders of one, the singular, sufficient, and already completed work of the Lamb. One. That's it. That one number changes absolutely everything in John's theology. Atonement is no longer the work of many martyrs over many generations. No. It is the finished work of one figure, in one act, for all time. The spiritual debt that the Maccabees believed they had to pay down through suffering and death, John's message is that the Lamb has stamped it paid in full. The transaction is complete. And this new theology, it changes everything about how a believer should respond to a hostile world. The answer to that raw cry from the altar, how long, is no longer take up arms or seek a martyr's death to pay the price. The new answer is radically different. Endure patiently, bear faithful witness. Your role isn't to achieve victory, but to testify to the victory that the Lamb has already won. Your suffering is no longer a payment, it is a testimony. So we're left with this final question. When you strip away the pop culture image of the apocalypse, when you get past the horsemen, what you find in Revelation 6 is something far more radical than just a prediction of disaster. It's a profound theological argument, and it was designed to arm a persecuted community with a brand new understanding of their own suffering. By reframing their pain, shifting it from a debt that has to be paid into a testimony that needs to be given, John fundamentally changes what it means to hold on to faith in a world that seems to be falling apart.